Hey there YouTube, Dozer here bringing you a new video. Today, joined by a very special guest to the channel, Andrew from Dice Commando. We're going to be talking about the new set, Before the Mistveil, get our thoughts on what we're looking forward to since we don't have all the pieces quite yet, and show what we're excited the most about and have a discussion. So I hope you enjoy. And so Andrew, thank you for coming on the channel.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me, man. Good to see you again.
Yeah, for those who are not aware, I'm normally a very frequent commenter rather, of the Dice Commando YouTube channel. I like to weigh in on all the great discussions that Andrew starts, and I've actually gone onto his channel a couple of times. And Andrew's been around since the very beginning of Flab, so he was invited to the Invitational that was over in Queenstown not too long ago, and he really is one of those old guards. So if you can, go over to his channel. I'll link it down in the description, and you can check out all of his awesome content. He posts way more frequently than I do, so you'll definitely get your fab fix over at Dice Commando. So right off the bat, Andrew, I wanted to start off by talking about Before the Mistveil, right? New set coming out. It's going to have 3 new heroes: Illusionist, Assassin, and Ninja. It's going to be a lot of fun. Potentially, we got this new chi mechanic and a couple other interesting mechanical things so far and some cool artwork. But what are you most looking forward to about this next set? What's really caught your eye?
I'm going to be very interested, and as with everyone, on how this chi plays out. Right? As you know, I know you're a gamer of other games as well, and one of the more risky things you can do to a game system is create an alternative resource system. So I think there'll be a lot of eyes on chi and see how it evolves.
Yeah, for those who are not aware, chi is this new mechanic that's going to be in Before the Mistveil, which is basically flavored resources. So basically what will happen is, so far, there are these instants and they're blue, and when you play them, after playing another blue on the same turn, what they'll do is they'll transcend, which means that they'll flip over, kind of like a Dromai's Dragon or a Prism's Angel, and on the other side, it's going to be a blue resource card. Think of like a cracked bauble or a titanium bauble, but instead of having defense like a titanium bauble does, it's like a cracked bauble where it doesn't defend at all. But while it pitches for 3, it also pitches for, at the same time, 3 chi, right? Because chi can be used to pay for either resources or chi costs, and every hero that's going to be in the new set is going to have a unique hero power and potentially more cards that are going to use this chi to power some pretty interesting effects. Notably, chi is on unique, as in legendary keyword cards, so not rarity, they're commons and such, but you're only going to be able to have one of them in your deck a piece. So you're not going to necessarily be able to have a deck full of chi necessarily, but that remains to be seen on exactly, what is going to be going on there. So is there anything that you've thought already so far, Andrew, about where chi might be hinting at the direction that we're going?
Well, one thing you mentioned there is you're right. We've only seen it on the legendary so far, but I think it's reasonable to assume maybe that it would have to be on commons and rares to make drafting work, because so far all of the heroes utilize chi within their abilities.
Well, the interesting thing is that there's a rule caveat that was put onto the release of Before the Mistveil where the legendary restriction will not be applying to draft or limited. So if you open multiple of the same legendary common or such in your packs, you can still use them. So that might help get at that. If the rates for getting the legendaries is high enough, maybe in constructed you can't run too many, but in limited and draft maybe there's enough.
I see. I did not realize that. Okay. And just to be clear for those folks out there, because it is a little confusing in this game, that there's legendary rarity and then there's legendary, which is one of in your deck. And we're using the term kind of interchangeably, I suppose. But in this case, referring to the one of in deck.
Yeah, for sure. And so one of the big things I'm excited about for the coming set is obviously another Illusionist. Now that Dromai's hitting Living Legend, we're going to have a little bit more flexibility, hopefully, to have a different flavor of Illusionist hitting the ground here. Dromai was the red Illusionist, Prism's obviously the yellow Illusionist, and now we're getting a blue Illusionist, or a Illusionist, as it were. And so I'm really excited to see what they do, because the new heroes seems to be based around this ward mechanic, and Spectral Shield specifically. And so a lot of those cards from Dynasty that we've seen in the past are hopefully going to be getting their time in the sun. I know that when they first came out, people were like, how are we going to use these? These don't really make any sense, but maybe now's their time. And I know that you play mostly Warrior and Ranger, but do either of the new heroes appeal to you besides the Illusionist?
We'll probably give a shot at Zen, the Tiger Daddy, or whatever they're calling him so far. I'm sure there's nicknames out there, but I had been thinking that Tigers was going to go somewhere, so I got fortunate and picked up quite a bit of the Tiger stuff prior to the announcement. I wish I could say I had inside info, but I didn't. I just got a little lucky on that, so I've got the Blitz stuff I need. So I'll probably give Zen a look and see how that works. But
yeah, because he's going to be pretty interesting. For those who don't know, Zen is going to have the ability to tutor out combo cards, kind of like Katsu does, but instead of discarding after a hit, he's going to pay 3 chi resources to do that. And so he's going to be heavily themed around the Tiger package that we got. I believe that was also Dynasty with the Crouching Tigers and things like that. So maybe this is the Dynasty set, because we're also getting New, who's going to be the Assassin hero, who we don't quite know what she's going to be doing, but there are some pretty high highs that she should be able to get based on how good her opponent's blues are. But speaking of Illusionist and how we're changing the name of the game, Dromai, finally living legend. I feel like it's already impacted the game in a huge way. But what do you think? Do you think Dromai leaving is too soon, too late? Is it a good thing for the game? What's your thoughts on those recent developments?
So I really enjoyed, this kind of a preface. I really enjoyed Dromai as a hero. I thought she was a really well done illusionist, kind of in, if you were to look at what Prism did and then compare Dromai to it, I thought that the dragons were a lot more fair Spectra type of thing. So I really appreciated Dromai. I do think she's been meta warping in kind of her own way of gatekeeping certain heroes. Like you look at someone like an Uzuri, that was really hard for her, and you're like, okay, she's gone. Now Uzuri can come to the forefront, except you got Prism right behind her, right? So I think Dromai leaving, yes, changed things, and then I think a lot of the smart minds will go to Prism, and I think that will become the meta staple. And a lot of the decks I've seen of Prism have, I think people are going to be wishing Dromai was still the person they were playing against, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because obviously I'm a huge fan of Prism, and it's always been like my calling card. And so what was interesting when Dusk Till Dawn came out and Prism got revitalized was that Prism really, really struggled into Dromai in into a lot of decks, right? But especially Dromai, because you didn't have enough action points to kill the dragons, but you also didn't have enough phantasm popping cards to slow down her board state. And so you would normally get overwhelmed pretty quickly, kind of like how a Teklevossen might. I know that he normally tends to have problems into Dromai as well. And so now that Prism is no longer having to worry about Dromai for one, but also thanks to heavy hitters, we got the new weapon, the Luminar's Angel's Glow. Prism definitely was held back a lot by Dromai, because not only was the matchup not great because you had to worry about this developing board state, but you also were getting hit by incidental sideboard hate, because everybody that was bringing phantasm popping cards for Dromai just hit you with the collateral damage. And so now it's not quite so obvious that people are going to run the same amount of phantasm hate as they had been. And so hopefully Prism can squeak by getting a little bit of equity in that way. Because again, I'm biased, but I do think that Prism is an interesting case as well, because she has been weak for basically a full year, and almost, right? And so now that she's finally getting to hit her stride, she is already starting to throw down with the biggest and baddest on the block, which is kind of crazy, right? Because she isn't doing anything fundamentally different than what she was doing before, but with just a little bit of extra juice from the new weapon, giving you that third action point to turn, as well as the ability to run more of your signature yellow cards and not feel bad about it. It does seem like she's well positioned. That said, I don't think she's going to be meta dominant, right? And hopefully going into Part the Mistveil, it also gives her a bit of hitting the brakes as well. Because decks like Brute are really tough for Prism to deal with generally. Even though lots of people claim to have figured out the secret sauce for Brute as Prism, KO, new guy in the block, really strong hero. Reinhardt and Levia, tons of benefit out of heavy hitters as well. And so now you also have things like mechanologists, right? Like Dash and Max that are generally pretty good into Prism as well. So maybe with Part the Mistveil, with all these zero block heroes, with all these chi cards in their hand that they can't block with, might incentivize some more aggro to come into the meta, like your ninjas, like your mechanologists again. And we'll see how that pressures Prism out of her current very good spot in the metagame. But I know as a Warrior and Ranger player, you might have some more like heavy thoughts on Illusionist being in the metagame than, say, a Brute player.
Yeah, that's fair. I do wonder how the heck Brody, so as of the time we're shooting this, Brody's won, I think, 2 events now with Azalea. And I don't know how, with ALS out there, he's been able to do that. So, I mean, I think that that's definitely a factor in as well. Your point about ninja is actually pretty valid, because I think Katsu's pretty scary right now on a lot of levels. He probably actually comes down a little bit with Dromai out, because he could mask up, right, pretty guaranteed. So that's fair to see where he'll land. How does Katsu generally do into Prism? He should do pretty well, right?
So it's kind of even, right? Prism can do scary things to Katsu, and Katsu can do scary things to Prism. In my experience, a lot of Katsus are on the Mask of the Pouncing Lynx right now, which is generally really scary equipment, right? Because that can let them set up these big bonds turns and really go super wide and really throw out tons of value. But at the same time, Prism has Halo of Elimination, which at instant speed, she can break it and flip out her Figment of Judgment by putting a, Herald from her hand into her soul, draw a card, get the Figment out of the deck off hero ability from Prism, and turn whatever card that Katsu searched off of Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, or even off his hero power, face down before he can play it out of Banish. So Prism has that emergency button of, hey, your bonds into whatever else you're planning on doing, nah, it's not happening this turn. On top of that, Prism also has the Herald of Judgment, which prevents the opponent from playing cards out of their banished for the whole turn. So if that's coming in for 6 go again, the Katsu has to think, well, if I block this, I'm not doing my big turn. If I don't block this, I'm not doing my big turn. So Prism definitely has some tools into the matchup. But I feel like if Katsu start going more towards the Mask of Momentum and start trying to really go for more of a value game rather than the maximum ceiling pop-off combo, I think they'll start to see more success and make it a bit harder for the Prisms. But at the current time, I'm not really scared when I sit down against someone who's presenting links into me. And so with Zen, we'll have to see how reliant he is on banishing, because I don't remember with his hero power if when he searches off of his chi ability, if he gets it to his hand or does banished. But
does say, I'm looking at him right now, it does say banish. Yeah, okay, good point. Good point.
Yeah, so that's also going to be pretty good into him. And yeah, because it is interesting, right? They're going to have all these no block cards and these mystic talented heroes. And so any deck that's going to really want to push through on hits might be really well served, whereas a deck that's more math based like KO or maybe like the mechanologists of the world might not get as much value because your opponent's not going to be planning on blocking anyway or worry about denying those on hits. But so maybe things like Usury or the new Assassin New and things like that in Ranger, right? I think Ranger's looking actually pretty good, at least into the Zens and the Katsus and some of these aggro decks of the world, as long as they can handle that Illusionist matchup, right?
Yeah. And then there's Kano, right? And then there's Kano.
There is. I always forget because my matchup into Kano is so good as Prism. It's normally kind of it's harder to lose than anything just because you have all this ward that's preventing the Kano from multiplying up his damage. But Kano is definitely still lurking there, and he's definitely still powerful, so we can't count him out just yet. I don't even know how close he is to Living Legend at this point. Maybe he's...
I can look it up. I think he's about 500. Is that right?
He's picking up some Battle Hardens. I know that. I don't think he's picked up any like big wins in a minute other than that, but...
Yeah, I'll get him here. He's he's only 303.
Wow, so he's still got some time.
Yeah, probably a long time because he's pretty easy to like. And from the field standpoint, he's pretty easy to tech into, right? On an individual level, like individual game, there's sometimes you just can't do anything, which blows. But from a field standpoint, he's pretty easy to tech into. So
yeah, and so once we have Heart the Mistveil coming out, we're gonna have probably a bunch of months until we have the next set after that, because we're also getting these like armory decks, right? I think they're getting the KO is the first one, and we don't know what's coming after. But it'll be interesting to see how they start using that to add new options to the game, because they're putting new cards in the KO deck. So the other decks, I would imagine, also have some new stuff.
Yeah, I'm hoping we see Olympia and Betsy. It had been hinted that both of them were going to get new stuff. Now, that certainly could just mean the expansion slot, one of the expansion slot cards we saw last weekend. So it could be that, but hopefully there's more for them, like Betsy's Log or Caber or whatever we're expecting to see. So
yeah, because I remember you were talking a bit about the new Olympia card that was spoiled, and it's the one where he gets to equip stuff from his inventory. And you weren't really hot on that card, which is interesting, because I thought it was interesting and possibly good, but what was so I guess not discouraging, but what kind of didn't hit the notes for you there?
Well, so just to bring your folks up to speed, the way the card reads is, wait, I just had it. All right, so the card reads, as an additional cost to play this, destroy X gold, and it's free to play. So you just basically blow up gold to play it, and equip X weapons and or equipment from your inventory, right? So remember that you have to have open slots to do that, and you're not re-equipping things you've blown up. You are doing it from, just like the flick knives, concealed blade, all that, it comes from your inventory. So you have to use those inventory slots for it. And I feel that I learned a hard lesson trying to make Assassin work, how much that sideboard slot you had to use to run all your 4 daggers really, really, really hurt Assassin. So I'm not sold that the extra 3 or 4 sideboard slots you're using are worth the payoff when you could just run Sigil of Solace or Oasis, which are always, universally useful. And the other part of this for me is that you have to make gold in order to use it. And it's kind of like, it's almost like it's a competing, with the exception of the Gallia, it's almost like they're competing objectives, right? You need to go aggressive and put damage in and wager in order to get the gold, but then you're just going to stop because this doesn't have go again. So then you're just going to pump the brakes, waste a whole turn, give up momentum to put on 1 or 2 pieces of equipment. I don't see them working together, but I again, when it came out, a lot of people were very good on it, but I think a lot of TCG players, especially in Flesh and Blood, go immediately to the to the moon combo, and they're like, oh my god, this combo potential is amazing, which is awesome. Like, I love doing theory crafting and stuff like that, but I tend to be a very practical person. Like, I don't know, like, because it's a 0/3 blue, like, maybe you give up a Warmonger slot to run this? I think probably not. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I went straight to thinking about how many good equipments there are in the game right now, such as the new Balance of Justice, competing with the original, not original, but the most recent darling, which was the Crown of Providence, right? And so you had a bunch of things going that way, where you destroy it and you use it and it's gone, but it has some really good utility, like against getting your arsenal out of there for a CNC or drawing cards off of a Bloodrush Bellow turn, something like that. And so being able to swap one of those out later into the game seems like it could be really useful, just in the sense that Olympia likes to do his wagering thing. Most of the Olympias I've seen are using kind of the Decimator type of build, getting some Vigor tokens and trying to do those kind of bigger swings where they do the 1 cost 3 pump wager into the axe off of the Vigor and stuff, and those seem to be pretty interesting. But what this does for them, I'm not really sure, like you're saying, right? Because even if you get all this gold, even if you manage to destroy, let's say, your hand equipment, which could start off as an Iron Song Versus or something, and you can start
Versus only, yeah, okay, but yeah, that only works with swords, but I understand.
Sure.
You're not on Decimator. Got it.
Right, yeah. If or some other temper equipment there. Or you could have like your temper chess piece, right? Like your grains. Or you could have your, you could start with something like a refraction bolters potentially, and then swap to dynamo if you were doing like a dual wielding build or something. I'm just throwing things out there, right? And maybe we're going to get new equipment over time that makes this better and better over time, right? Because if we remember, the Emperor, right? The Emperor can use equipment that's both warrior, draconic, and wizard. And so he was having a really sick decked out then of equipment once a couple of things came out, and he had things like the Furnace, and he had the Storm Striders, and he had, you name it, right? And so I wonder how over time this card probably scales amazingly with the card pool of the game. And like maybe right now it doesn't feel like it has every payoff it needs, but we don't know what the generics are in this next set. And there's generic equipment that Olympia really loves, and he can swap off of it if it breaks, or into it if, you know, he gets an early game kind of lead. It's hard to say, but I think you're right that it's not obvious how it fits into the wager type of package that he's been given. Because his card pool is relatively small for like, because I think you called it like his talent is like wager, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he functionally only has, in terms of the front pumps you were talking about, he only has 3 of them that are red 1/3s, obviously. You know, he's got a full suite of 9, and then he's got the react wager, and then he could run like the wage cards, but most people like the wage attack actions, but most people don't. At least I don't do that.
Yeah, because normally when we're thinking about hero viability in this game, it really comes down to like, what does your hero do that other heroes can't, right? With Kesai, when she came out in CC, she was really exciting because all of a sudden, hey, we've got this Raisin Army type of mechanic, we have blood on our hands in CC, people were really excited about it. But in the end, people decided that, you know, Axe's Dorinthia, Hatchet's Dorinthia, was a better dual wielding build because she could swing a 3rd time on her turns if she was given enough space to do so with all the extra go agains, because you want redundancy in that deck. Makes really good use of hit and run, for instance. And you know, maybe that changes now. Maybe Kesai comes back or competes with Dory now that Dromai's gone, potentially. But with Olympia, he doesn't really have anything super thrilling except for Up the Ante, right? Which is a specialization, which if he gets through, it's pretty interesting because it lets him get like 3 different tokens potentially and a bunch of value out of nowhere, but does it win him a game, right? And not really, right? It's not the same type of value as like a Blood Rush or, you know, something that you can plan your whole game around and really pop off with your Up the Ante. So, and I don't think that this other payoff of his specialization really puts him above and beyond, like kind of like where Teklevossen, right, builds up all these armors, these evos, and he can get really, really strong as the effects of those kind of come online. But that takes him a long time, and he has to play very defensive, very slow gameplay to do that, which opens him up to more board control type strategies like Prism, and maybe some more evasive decks like Rhinar, potentially. So we'll see how Olympia uses it. But I think, did we get any other spoilers? We got the Victor Goldmane spoiler. So lets him, generate a bunch of gold?
Well, 1 gold and then a whole bunch of might.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so it says
gold, he gets value.
Says create a gold token, so it's 1/3 goes. Sorry, 1 defend 3, not 1 attack 3. So for 1, create a gold token, then if you control 3 or more gold, create that many might tokens. So presumably with his shield on board, you would only need to have generated 1 other gold through a clash.
Yeah, and then I guess the idea is that you sync this up with the Golden Sun and you try and just get this big overpower slap. But I don't know if that's what he was lacking, right? Like, I'm not sure, but, and because he's been pretty decent, he's been performing pretty well. A lot of heroes
performing very, very well. Yeah, and you know, people don't want to admit this, but I think it's true. Victor is exceedingly easy to play, and that is not a complaint, right? But it makes him very attractive as a hero. He's very easy to play. You can very easily run him for 10 rounds, I think. Yes, you have to do math and counting, but functionally, you're not really trying to set up a whole bunch. you're just kind of getting value out of defending and swinging back, and it's a very straightforward, maybe not easy, it's very straightforward deck to play. And again, that's not a bad thing. One thing that surprised me, I didn't realize it until after I did my live stream that you were referring to. I'm surprised this card wasn't yellow, because his headpiece right now currently really only triggers, because his current headpiece, his spec headpiece, I should say, is if you defend with 2 or more yellows, then you create a gold. And right now, the only yellow I think that deck is playing is Golden Sun, with maybe a Remembrance. So that's interesting. This probably could have been yellow for the same impact. But to your point, Dozer, do you think he runs this? It being a non-clash card, do you think it, or like a non-attack card, do you think he runs this?
So I haven't seen a ton of innovation coming out of Victor in a while. Normally when I play against him, it's as Prism, and generally I'm playing like the Vestige Aura game plan into him, and the games kind of go longer because he can block so well over time and try and whack away the auras, whack away the angels. But normally it's a pretty favored matchup for Prism, and so when I have seen a Victor play against more traditional matchups, he seems to be doing just fine, right? Like, as you said, very straightforward. You know, he gets either a resource off of a Vigor, or he gets, depending on if they're running Tunic or if they're running some other way to generate resources, they can do a pitch a blue, swing a 4-cost attack, and just generally outvalue their opponents because they have all these good 3 blocks and 4 blocks and can draw cards off the hero ability. So whether or not this card will see play in Victor, it's hard to say. I mean, I imagine people are going to try it, of course. Right? People are going to try it and they're going to see if it pans out. But when you compare it to something like Terra Sunder, right, or some of the other really awesome Guardian Blues, I don't know if it really is on the same level, right? It's not really providing any disruption. It's providing a little bit of offensive value. But if you compare it to another blue attack buff type card, because effectively, right, might tokens are exactly the same as things like, what's it called? It's like the WTR card. It's an aura. It gives the Guardian attack +3 or whatever when it pops. It's like, oh, come on. It's a really old card, but basically no one runs it. And there were all,
well, because you have the other ones now that do +5, right?
Yeah. Well, you have a lot of those auras that have existed through all these different sets where Guardian was printed. Like even Big Bop is a more recent example where you play it on your 1 turn, next turn it pops for value. And this card is kind of doing the same thing where you're getting temporary offensive value if you can follow it up with an attack on the next turn. And so it'll be interesting to see if it can compete even by the numbers with something like Big Bop or, you know, whatever other cards like. I think one of them used to be I'm so forgetting, but there was an aura that gave you +3 and Dominate, right, as a red. Yeah. You know, a 2-cost card or whatever. So it's like imposing dominance or I don't know, something, but the it'll be interesting to see how this even competes numbers wise with that, because it's like for every gold you get 1 might, and it's a blue card, and it costs how much?
1.
Costs 1. I mean,
and it has goes though. It has goes, so it doesn't stop your turn.
Right. So I mean, I could see.
And if you're running an Othos, but I guess you don't want to run an Othos because you probably want to run your shield. But I've actually seen quite a bit of Victors running an Othos. So
yeah, or Sledge, I think, for maybe the mirror. But however that works out. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. There's a lot of potential room for cool spoilers to come. I know that we don't have all the information yet, and we're still kind of waiting on all of that. But what have you mostly been playing recently? It's been Warrior or Ranger or
Decimator Olympia, and been trying to explore Uzuri this last week. Hasn't been going super well, so probably not going to stick on that because I cannot win the Prism matchup. It's like an auto fold. So, and she's everywhere right now. Her and Viserai are everywhere right now. So,
yeah, Prism has definitely gotten, well, she's always been popular, right? But now that she's seen some success at the bigger tournaments, people are starting to get excited to go out and try it. I think even some people on online have been trying to fill their decks with poppers just to specifically annoy the prisms. Because I don't know, people. I know Prism can be frustrating to play against for a lot of decks, so it definitely can lead to some bad feelings. But yeah, Olympia Decimator. When I played against that, it was pretty interesting because you have a lot of these. Like, you have a lot of pressure from your opponent getting bad value out of their blocks, especially if they're defensive deck, right? Because if their first card that they try to use that's not an equipment is like a D-React or something like that, they just lose so much value off of it. They can't really rely on that strategy. They have to throw multiple cards in front of it, or they have to not block at all. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I know that whenever I've seen the Felling Swing come down into a Decimator Olympia, I'm like, oh, I don't want to block that. That looks scary. It's 10 damage. So
yeah, I think overall it's not fast enough to be a top tier deck. Because if they can, and by they, like if you're playing against a Guardian, once they hit second cycle, it's kind of sayonara, and you're not really fast enough to get up on them before that happens. And like even to your point with Prism, you're not really fast enough to do anything before she board states you. Because like the Prism starts with what, 32 health, right?
32, yeah.
And I've generally gotten them into the like 16 range, and then all of a sudden it's like done. So they just take 2 axes to the face, and they're like, "That's cute, angels," right?
Yeah, yeah. It is interesting, right? Because as far as warriors go, they're supposed to be very weapon centric, but a lot of the cards that came out that wager and stuff are attack actions, and so I'm not really sure how Olympia is supposed to slot into the meta game because, right, the dominant warrior at the moment is Dorinthia, and she's kind of got this go wide dynamo value strategy, and you've got either these hyper disruptive decks like Guardians or Ranger, or you've got or even Assassin, or you've got more of like your aggros, and Olympia doesn't really fit into any of those categories, right? He's slow like Teklevossen. He's got some good like late game value if he can get there, but if you can't get there, then it's kind of weird. So I wonder what space Fab has to cater to that type of longer game horizon playstyle, because the game is so fast right now.
And that's okay. I mean, not every hero needs to be good. But kind of to your point, you'd said this, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes ago. If you're not using your hero for their hero ability, then there's somebody else that does it better, right? And I think that's Olympia's problem, is he's really cool, but like, are you really going to run the wager stuff? And if you're not using the wager stuff, like, why are you running him? So I think you land back on Dorinthia. But actually, to push back on Dorinthia, do you think she's good now that Dromai's gone?
I mean,
I think she's going to have a real hard time into Prism.
She definitely will have a hard time into Prism. At the same time, it does good numbers, right? The deck does good numbers. It's got a lot of armor. It has the refreshing Valiant Dynamo. It doesn't have any disruption, but it also is hard to disrupt the deck because it can function off of very small hands and also larger hands. I know that one of my favorite plays when I first started playing Kasai was take it on the chin, block with every card in my hand except for a yellow, swing 2 swords, refresh Dynamo, pass, and that turned my yellow card into a 5 value play, a 5 value card. So that was pretty good. And so Dorinthia can do that and more because she has so much more ability to swing multiple weapons. She can get use out of the agilities, and the Blade Runner's kind of on the same turn if things hit. So even though Dromai is gone, I don't think she's necessarily going anywhere, although she doesn't necessarily have the most like... She's not a best deck in format, right? Like, she's not the one that's leading the pack. She's not the one doing something that's super unfair. She's just a solid, constantly providing good value type hero. And I think a lot of heroes are starting to fall into that category. Right? You look down the list of the heroes, and I know people like to make tier lists and stuff on which hero is better than others, but now the gap is so close together because, aside from a couple standouts of really high ceilings, things like Katsu or Prism or some other variant of that where you have this potential for really high value, most heroes are kind of in that tighter band where you can kind of play anything and not feel like you are out of the game entirely. And even the stronger decks like Katsu and Prism and these like higher ceiling decks, they still don't just win for free, right? Like they very much have to execute very, treacherous waters, and then also get a little lucky on drawing the right cards at the right time sometimes when they have that lower consistency. So yeah, Dorinthia, I don't know. I was more excited for Kasai, but at the same time, Raising Army is a little gimmicky, and Blood in Her Hands is a little hard to get into CC because you don't have that copper generation. So I think a lot of heroes are in this spot where what they would want to do in an ideal world just isn't quite consistent or isn't quite accessible enough. Like the Kasai example where you've got the copper generation for Blood on Her Hands, which is a really awesome thing she can do, but it's really hard in CC. Or you've got something like Olympia, right, where he's got these really cool mechanics as far as wagering, but he doesn't have enough enablers quite to get there. And if he had just a couple more, then maybe that would start to kind of come into view there. But I kind of like the game when not every card in your deck is amazing. In a way, right? Like if every card in your deck goes towards your game plan, then it feels like there's a lot less room for deck building because the obvious cards to include become the vast majority of your deck. And I think Hatchet Dorinthia is kind of like that right now, where it's like, okay, you throw in your hit and runs, you throw in your blade runners, you throw in, you name it, and it almost builds itself. Whereas a deck like Olympia, a deck like Riptide, a deck like even Usury, right? You have to make some concessions in your deck by going to the generic pool, trying to find things that make sense, because you don't just have all these in-archetype cards that you love to run. So I kind of like that. And unfortunately, Prism is kind of too synergy reliant to dip much outside of that. But I am always looking for the new weird tech to throw in there and try and do something interesting. But
sure. Well, and that's, to kind of bring us back to Mistveil, actually, right? That's always one of the, I don't want to say pitfall in a negative way, but that's always one of the issues with talented heroes, the Everfest heroes, Tales of Aria heroes exempted. The stuff available to the talented heroes, by and large, they're pretty siloed. Like you said, 60 cards of the 80 kind of build itself, because they have limited access, and we're certainly with the Mystic talent going to run into that, I would expect as well. Maybe there's one or two ways that they'll give us to build. Historically, one of those is superior, and then you end up where you're at, right? So do you think that'll be the same case, or do you think that this Chi thing will open up a lot more potential paths? Because you can't just windmill slam 18 no blocks in your deck. Maybe you can, I don't know, but that seems not ideal.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because the way I've been thinking about the Chi cards is they're kind of like your Eye of Ophidias and your Heart of Fyendals, because they're resource cards that have a tiny benefit in addition to pitching, right? Now, the way you turn that on, if anybody's played Kano before, they'll know that, like, let's say you're playing Chain Lightning, Chain Lightning from Banish's Kano, and you haven't played another wizard card that turn. Well, if you, as an instant, use Kano's ability, banish another card at the top and play it before that Chain Lightning resolves, the Chain Lightning is going to see that card that was played. Same thing with like a Gaze of the Ages. And so you're going to be able to have them both see each other. So in Part the Mistveil, it's going to be very similar, where if you play one of your Transcend cards, so something like Stir the Pot, well, if you play Stir the Pot as an instant, and then you also play before it resolves another blue Transcend instant at the same time, then both of them will see each other, and they'll both come back to your hand as blue Chi cards, and you'll have gotten the tiny little benefit as if you had pitched them like they were an Eye of Ophidia or like they were a Heart of Fyendal or something like that. And it only happens one time per game, right? You don't get that flip side again, as far as we know. But that's how I've been kind of thinking about them, and so it's true, you don't want to just slam a bunch of no blocks in your deck for no reason. And especially when you're playing a deck like New or Enigma, who are generally more defensive classes, right? Illusionist generally likes to sit back, build up a board state, and try to use that aggressively. And Spectral Shields, as Enigma is going to be based around from her hero power giving us that clue, is interesting because Spectral Shields are ward. And so if you take any damage, your ward is destroyed. And there are a lot of heroes now, which we got tech for, where it bypasses damage prevention. So Rangers have Murkmire Grapnel, Assassins have something like Malign, and then even Dorinthia has Chorus of Iron Song, and there's Shuko and other type of effects. So it'll be interesting to see how all these heroes that have the ability to bypass ward can probably just blow Enigma out of the water, especially because she can't block, right? She'll have to be very careful about, does she put in cards that block to protect her ward? And then if people can get it around it through various ways, she might not even be able to rely on ward sticking around, and maybe is going to use it like the turn she makes it and then hope it gives her value later. So we don't really know yet, but that could be interesting. Yeah. And so to your point about the talents, right? On the one hand, I like how the game is balanced around talents, in the sense that if you have a talented hero, they're incentivized to run cards in their own wheelhouse. Because in the past, the time that wasn't true, it was Briar. And Briar's Cheerio list...
And Lexi.
Yeah, but that came later, right? I'm thinking of from release, right? Briar never used her own cards. The Elemental Runeblade, Fusion, never used any of her own mechanics. It was raw, Plunder Run, zero cost go again attacks with Mount Heroic, or even not even needing Mount Heroic at the time. And it was kind of a letdown, right? Because she has all these really cool cards that come out in the set that she's in, and she doesn't even use them. Whereas Lexi at the start,
like Flicker Wisp, right?
Right.
What a cool card. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but so like Lexi did use a lot of her cards when she first came out, like Ice Fusion and some Lightning Fusion for a while. And then, like you're saying though, when Outsiders came out and she got all those brand new, awesome Ranger cards, she said, "Oh, these are just better than my Elemental cards. I'm going to get rid of them." But she was able to keep Voltaire, which completely changed the game compared to the other Rangers at the time. So on the one hand, I like as a player knowing that when I play Prism, I don't need to buy 3 CNC, 3 East Strike, every generic Majestic from under the sun, just to be able to play my hero at a competitive level, like a lot of heroes have to. Whereas I can say, and even as Lexi or as a wizard, you have a lot more focus on the synergy within your own kit, and so generally you don't have to spend quite as much money on your deck unless you're trying to bling it out, like a lot of Prism players like to do. So
yeah, and new is interesting. So let me kind of go into your brain on this one. There's been a lot of discussion recently, at least driven by the competitive top-down, about variance and dislike of that, or at least concern around it, whatever the proper term is. New seems pretty... New seems like she has the potential to be very variance heavy, depending basically just on what your opponent plays and when they play them. And I realize there's an argument there for, well, just get good. But you don't always control your top decks, and you don't always control what your hands are. So she seems like has potential for that. What do you think?
So I didn't look at New and think that there was going to be a problem with variance. And additionally, I tend to, especially nowadays, not tune too deeply into the super competitive circle. I think a lot of the people that are tournament grinders get a little too wrapped up in making it such a big part of what they do, where they're going like every weekend to every big event all around the world, which great for them. Brody I think is like 18, 19, and he's flying to Phuket, Indonesia, right? Like he's been all around the world, and I don't know where he gets the time, but I definitely salute him for being able to go do that. That's awesome. But I think when you spend so much time on something, you kind of get wrapped up in it, and so I haven't really been worried about the level of variance in the game. I think you need to have variance in a card game, right? That's one of the things that we accept, that the novelty of the game comes from the fact that it plays out a little bit differently every time. And if it was chess, or if you want to play chess, then you can go play chess, right? And so this doesn't pretend to be chess, and it's not going to be chess, and that's okay. And so as far as New, though, when I looked at New, the first thing I thought of was when you pitch for her Chi ability, it says For the rest of the turn, you can play blue cards from your opponent's banished without paying their cost. That means you can play more than one by spending a single blue chi pitch card. Which is insane, because let's say your opponent, like the Guardians have been talking about, where they have their Tear Asunder, and they have a Macho Grande and banished, because you banished them from something. And then now you can play that for free off one card, right? So you're getting... Macho Grande, I think, costs what, 7?
Yep.
And then Tear Asunder costs 3. So let's just say that you had 3 blues, a Tunic Resource, and 2 cards. That's a full hand. That's a full Guardian hand that you're throwing at them for 1 card. It's pretty good. That's pretty good. And so Assassin generally struggles to pressure people. And so I'll be interested to see if Nu plays this more defensive, slowly try and set up a win con using her opponent's cards against them, which could be really cool.
I think she has to. Yeah.
She also might have a way to manipulate the opponent's properties of their cards while they're in banish. I would imagine that she might be able to treat a card as if it were blue in her opponent's banish, because otherwise her ability might be a little too narrow, in the sense that not every hero is going to be running blues. Now that Dromai's gone, that's less of a problem, but you normally don't want to play blues and they kind of suck. So maybe she doesn't need the blue ability into other heroes. Maybe her tokens, whatever that she's been generating, I forget what they're called, but it's like snake themed, are going to be enough. But I would imagine that, well, I would hope that LSS gave her a little way to play with the rules of the game a little bit, and not pigeonhole her into only being good against Guardian late game. But that is...
Yeah, that's fair. I hadn't thought about that part of it. To me, it's no mistake, right? If you look at Nu, like you said, until the end of the turn, you may play blue cards from that hero's banish zone. Typically, in this type of situation, it would be until end of turn you may play that card, right? And I don't think that's a huge mistake that LSS made, right? I mean, that's very clearly intentional that they did it that way. So it seems to me that she's probably some sort of like disruption control hero trying to get you, because what happens over the course of the game, what happens to your deck by and large, you deplete your reds and your deck becomes a greater percentage of blues, right? I mean, by and large, that's what happens. So I think that's the angle.
The thing is, though, with Nu, right, and Assassin in general, right, Assassin is a class where you have low damage for resource investment off your daggers, and your attacks don't really get bigger than 5 generally. And so, like in archetype. And so you block well, you have the ability to buy back your equipment if you do contract and make silver. But so you are disruptive, so most of your value comes from slowing down your opponent rather than accelerating yourself. And so that lends itself to this longer term game plan. And so I would imagine that Nu is going to try and do that with whatever her core mechanic is, as far as pushing some damage to potentially banish things, and then just using... And I guess the reason why she has her ability, even if it seems kind of bad, is that she doesn't block, right? So in the late game, she's going to need a way to turn her blues into value, since they just pitch and her daggers are not very strong in the late game. So I could imagine a world where she plays the blues because it gives her the ability to do something with her hand in the late game, especially in Limited, because I think LSS cares a lot about Limited when they design the heroes, and maybe in a way more than Constructed, because when you look at Olympia, right, in CC, it's not super compelling to run him for the wager, but when you're playing him in Limited or Draft or Sealed, it's pretty relevant, right? Because a lot of those cards end up being useful, and you have the ability to get some good value off of him. And then Riptide was kind of similar, where he didn't really come out the gate swinging. Teklo also didn't come out the gate swinging, or even Max, right? A lot of the heroes that have been coming out in the past year or so, they are better in their Limited environments than they are in Constructed. And they're like more, I guess, tuned to being useful in those environments. So I could see a world where like maybe Nu is meant to use her ability in Limited, because Enigma is going to be an illusionist and is probably going to have some big blue attacks, and that's probably what Enigma needs to handle that matchup, right? She needs a way to get those powerful cards used against in the end game. Maybe against the Ninja, maybe there's some synergy with going wide there. So I could see that being the reason. Like maybe her most value doesn't even come from her hero ability. Maybe it comes from whatever her new mechanic is with like the snake themed cards and tokens. After all, maybe she's more aggressive than we think in CC. Who knows?
Well, we'll see. We saw, I think it was today, the signature weapons were updated, and she's getting the Beckoning Mistveil. Obviously, we don't know what that is, but it's not another assassin 2-for-1 dagger. Let's hope to the assassin gods.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting though. I didn't know that. I know that they revealed the name of Enigma's weapon. It's like Ledger of Ancestry or something, or whatever.
Yeah, all three of them were updated today. So new is, as I just mentioned, the Beckoning Mistblade. Enigma is Cosmo Scroll of Ancestral Tapestry. So that's going to be some sort of non-attack weapon that, probably lets you turn spectrals into weapons somehow. I mean, we already have 95 of those, but sure. Yeah. And then what's the other guy's name? Zhao Zhen. He's at the bottom. He has the Tiger Taming Kakara, and I think the Kakara is a staff of sorts. Yeah. I think
his artwork had a staff. I think.
Yeah.
And new, I think she had like a dagger in her artwork, right? Or in the promotional video that they did.
I guess I kind of expected New's weapon to like be a hairpin or something like that, like with the prostitute assassin thing.
Yeah. Yes, but something stabby, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if Enigma's weapon is going to be like a 1-cost Spectral Shield attacking weapon. Like maybe it swings for 3. Because when we've seen
it's 3 for 4, 2 for 5 no goes, 3 for 4 goes, 2 for 5 no goes. It could just be 1 for 3 no goes, is what you're saying?
I'm thinking because maybe she blocks a lot and then she doesn't. Her first swing costs 1 less, and so being able to just say, "Hey, swing for 3,"
got it,
like without spending anything, could be because what she'll have to probably do is create the Spectre Shield on her turn with a chi, and then swing it. And then if it costs another card, that's really bad. But if it is a 1-card swing 3, make a Spectral, that's pretty decent. And then it kind of prices it out of like Prism because she doesn't want it because it doesn't have Go Again. And then there aren't any other illusionists, so I can see that happening.
Yeah, we do need to keep in mind though that the weapons they're giving them within sets are obviously going to be tied to their theme, but also intended for limited, right? So like Iris is currently not tied to anything, I believe, right? So she'll always have access to Iris and then the new orb. And hey, the new orb, like if you can keep that spectral around and it keeps getting counters and all that, like that could get pretty dirty real quick, right?
Yeah, maybe. It really comes down to how well she blocks, right? Because if she's running all these 0 blocks for the chi in her deck, Illusionist has a lot of good 3-block cards, especially the Spectral Shield cards that came out of Dynasty. Spectral Procession, Spectral Rider, Spectral Prowler. They all block 3. They can be blue. There's a lot of potential there, but I'm not sure.
Well, hold on. Why does she need blues?
Well, I mean, she might not, but
yeah, because it's your first spectral attack costs 1 less to activate, create a spectral token with 1 counter, but that's the chi. So like I could foresee a world, like you're right, if she gets a 1/3, I could foresee a world in which she basically is a red line. I want to take that back. I'm not saying she is red line, but like she may be able to operate with 0 resources is my point.
Yeah, like she might be focused on just using the chi for pitch and like maybe parking 1 in Arsenal, and eventually like she'll play 2 of them or something on the same turn to get them into chi, and then pitch 1, make a shield, and then start getting them into her deck potentially. But just like Spectral Procession, Go ahead.
Prismatic. What's the one from Monarch where you poop out 3?
Shield. Yeah,
Prismatic Shield. It seems good.
Yeah. Fits into her identity probably. And then like Spectral Procession, right? It's a 0-cost red 3-block attack, which has attack equal to the number of spectral shields you control. So it has phantasms. That's kind of icky, but I could definitely see a world where she's able to block a lot with these red cards, like the Spectral Prowler, Spectral Procession, whatever. And eventually she can go again, slam down a big boy. But again, it all just depends on the cards we get. But it's fun to theorize and think where we could go. Luckily for me, I'm sitting pretty. I own every Illusionist card and every Prism card generally. So people have been freaking out about, the prices have been shooting up for like the new expansion slot cards, right? Because they're super rare, but at the moment they're printed, most of the people don't really care about them or pay much attention. And then boom, all of a sudden, new hero gets spoiled, new class comes out. People want to rush to make sure that they don't get price gouged. And I'm just like, I'm glad I don't have to worry about that. I'm sorted. So.
Yeah, some of the Bright Lights expansion slot cards right now are kind of stupid how expensive they are because nobody wants to open Bright Lights right now. So.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a trend going forward. I think LSS is definitely, especially with outsiders, right? They decrease the Majestic pull rate in the sets. Then we had Dusk Till Dawn, which is, I think, a limited print run, like one-time print run thing. And it has a lot of really random, weird Majestics in it, like Warmongers and some other weird ones that who knows if they'll ever see play. But then you have like Bright Lights, it's all mech set. And now we finally have Heavy Hitters, and that's more like a generic appeal set. But for any of these sets where they were more niche in their audience or what have you, I mean, Codex of Frailty is like $65 right now for a normal copy. That's insane. That's wild.
I mean, that's the cost of a box, right?
Yeah, that's like CNC territory back in Monarch days. That's up there. So, I think LSS has, for better or for worse, figured out how to make the Majestics hold value more. And when you have these expansion slot cards, which I think is a great change, right? I think expansion slot's awesome. Being able to add cards in the game. I think people are going to start realizing that, hey, maybe we shouldn't just sell these for pennies the day after the set releases. Maybe hold them for a little bit, and we'll see. But it is interesting to see how the set design is changing over time, and it's affecting how players get hold of the cards. But
the expansion slot, to your point, has been such a success, right? It lets them be so much more nimble, and they don't even necessarily have to play test the expansion slot cards to the same extent that they do the set because they don't have to draft it and all that stuff. So it's really a major win, and it doesn't require them to release a dynasty where they were releasing a handful of cards that we needed and the rest of the set was kind of bleh, right? So
yeah, I think the expansion slot's awesome. It enables them to, like you said, be more flexible. Obviously, Prism got her new weapon out of that. We're getting some specializations for Olympia. Maybe it does something, maybe it doesn't. And we get cool reprints like Tunic, right? I remember I was at a draft locally, and I opened our packs, and I had a Tunic in there. I was like, hey, sick. That's amazing. I now have one that I can, so I don't have to just move the one around between all my other decks, right? I have like this extra one. That's an awesome thing that's rare and not bound to happen, but the fact that they have that flexibility now is super great. And so it'll be interesting to see what they put in Mistveils, because we're getting some of those specializations, but the expansion slot's been normally having at least like 8 to 12-ish cards per set. So there's still a lot of room to get something interesting. Maybe some, I don't know if they put generics there, unless it's a reprint.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, well, that's fair. I don't know why they would do that. They just put it in the set, right?
Right. Yeah, any closing thoughts on Part the Mistveil?
Well, what's your take? Last thing I'll ask is, what's your take on the mechanic of chi itself? I'm concerned that it seems, I already spoke to the alternate resource part of it, and that's from a game balance standpoint, but this part I'm talking about is it seems a little clunky, just in terms of, like, I'm really worried that like all the games on pre-release weekend are going to go to time because people are like, okay, now play this card. Now I've transcended. So I take this back to my hand. Now I'm going to do this for the thing. All right, now I'm going to go tutor my deck. And it's just like, seems like a lot. I mean, and by clunky is maybe not the right word, but like it seems like a lot of steps, considering that your opponent has a whole bunch of instants in their deck and there's all these windows. It seems complicated to me, but maybe it's not. I don't know.
So my thought on the chi mechanic overall is that I think one thing that I straight up don't like about it is the fact that you have to flip the card over.
Mm-hmm.
I hate doing that. I hate flipping cards over in my sleeves. It just annoys me. I like to double sleeve my cards, and so like you get the air pockets in there and whatever, and so it's just annoying. And then if you want to bring like tricked out versions, right? Like if I have my my angels, right, and I have my pretty versions and I have my in-deck versions, well, technically by the tournament rules, I'm gonna get dinged because I have in a hard case outside of my deck in different sleeves, these different angels, which, realistically is not actually going to be a problem, but they don't go in the main deck flipped and everything. But the flipping the chi cards, I think I just hate that. Like I would rather add a bauble to my hand from outside the game and just send the other one to banish or something. Because if they're not going to flip back, there's no reason for them to flip at all. The whole point of the dragons and angels flipping was that when you did the invoke or you flip the figment, when it dies, that's when it goes to the graveyard, because otherwise you could like recur, invoke Tumultide multiple times. You can get the figment multiple times. So it made sense for them to flip. But unless we're flipping our chi back into normal cards, I don't see a reason why they had to be like that. Maybe using them flips them. I don't know. I don't think they've explained that or not, but that would be.
I actually suspect it. I suspect it will. Otherwise, you run out of ways to transcend. But maybe that's part of the WinCon design. That's fair. But I assumed that after you spent it, you would detranscend, unsend.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think
descend.
Yeah, descend indeed. Flipping a card for it to stay flipped seems like just an annoyance. I don't like it personally. I don't think that it's going to lead to time installing because the cards are very simple in what they do. It's like, gain 1 health, right? Block 1 damage. The very, very small effects. So sure, there's gonna be some times where people are having to say like, hey, I gotta think this out for a second, gotta get my windows right. But as long as people are given the information and know how the mechanics work, where you have to hold priority, play another one, have them both resolve, see each other, get your resources back to hand, and then play your actual class cards, I think it shouldn't be too bad on like the limited and draft aspect, because normally you're not sleeving up your commons. I think a lot of people just throw them away nowadays because when you've had enough bulk, you just, to me, that was a foreign concept, right? When I first got into this game, I would never throw cards away. I never owned enough cards to even have that be a problem growing up. But now I'm like, okay, I don't need these commons. It's okay. I'll get the good ones out and toss the yellow, come to money where your mouth is, or whatever it is. So I could see the flipping not being such a big deal since you're not double sleeving the cards. But yeah, I think Transcend is cool. I think triggering this effect and having to like combo your blues together for value is interesting. And paying for that as like a 0 block is interesting. It just remains to be seen what the payoff is, because it's all going to come down to their class cards. And the Tiger's probably going to be plenty good, and then Illusion's probably going to be plenty good. I guess New is the big question mark to see, hey, can she get there? So we'll see.
Yep. All right.
Well, thank you everybody for watching, and thank you, Andrew, for coming again onto the channel and having a fun conversation. Again, check out his channel. I'll put the link in the description down below. I'm looking forward to Mistveil, and I know everyone else out there is as well. We're going to try and do some Enigma content on the channel, time permitting. So otherwise, thanks all for watching. Have a good day. We'll see you in the next video. Peace.